bravefathers.com. Welcome to the Brave Fathers Show. And now, the prophecy.
Fathers, how can you start winning in UK family courts? And elsewhere as well, the advice we will look at today, fortunately and perhaps unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, applies to virtually every country in the world these days. Of course, none of this is legal advice. Please seek qualified legal advice to really understand what to do. What I'm sharing here with you is the experience I have had myself going through the family courts, and of course, by helping other fathers get positive results, because this is a tough game. Winning in family courts is very difficult for a man. You know, it's interesting when I think about it, because one of my uncles also had to go through family courts, and he told me he won. Of course, he won. He won full care of my cousin, and so she lived with him. And it was interesting because he represented himself as well, and got good results. But that was a long time ago, So it's interesting how things have been the same for decades, and fathers are still struggling, which is another discussion, but it's something worth considering when you're going through the courts, because the odds truly are stacked against you. I'm not saying this for you to be afraid. I'm saying this for you to understand the reality of the situation. As it stands now, most courts don't see the value of a father. He's more like an addition and a nice to have for the child and a positive influence, perhaps, but they don't see him as a necessity. They don't see him as a central figure. However, there are legal arguments you could apply that make you a central figure as a father. And in fact, in my case, that's what CAFCASS did, because of the age of the children at the time. She really helped a lot. And I know CAFCASS is biased and can be biased, but in my case, I've had a lot of help from CAFCASS, but also I had to put myself in position where they are able to help me. So those are some of the things I'm going to share with you today. Of course, it's a very large topic, so I'll just try to fit as much as possible into this time we speak together, which will be roughly about an hour. And of course, you can reach me at bravefathers.com, and I will help you personally. I always give out a free, full consultation with all the best advice I have for you, because I was helped a lot when I started out, and I wanted to give back. And I understand your situation. It's tough, it's painful, and it's hard. But you can win. You can get good results. So the first question I want you to ask yourself is, what does it mean to win? And again, there's another piece of bad news I have, because in most cases, not all, but in most cases, all you can really hope for is some kind of contact with your children and some kind of overnight stay. How much of that you get depends on the case. It depends on the time you start preparing. That's why it's very important to start working on it very early, to start getting this kind of insight and advice very, very early. Perhaps way before you realize there's trouble, so that you can actually win. Because if you go in too late, then it becomes hard for you to get going. In fact, I can't remember who it was I spoke to, but there was one gentleman who he said to me, look, the more you wait, the longer you delay this, the harder it's going to get. That same day, I was booked in with a solicitor because, I took it seriously, and I was lucky. Now, if I knew what I know now, I would have done that earlier. But at the time I spoke to my first solicitor, after the breakdown happened, the relationship breakdown happened, I had already spent months speaking to other solicitors, other people, lots of people, to understand the system the best way I could. So when it came down to it that I had to actually go to court, I was already educated about a lot of the processes. And what I did realize is that there's a very large gap between what you are told by solicitors and what happens on the ground, which is where I come in, which is where this show and this kind of advice comes in. So that was one advantage I had. And I say this because a lot of people tell me I was lucky, that I got what I got. I was able to represent myself. I did have solicitors in the beginning. I did have legal aid in the beginning, actually, because I was in a tough financial spot and my circumstances were such that I was able to obtain legal aid. However, I very quickly realized that solicitors only take you so far. Now, this is not to put them down, but it's like any other job. Some people are good, some people are not so good. And no matter how good a solicitor is, there's only so much they can do in court because the problem itself is not entirely a legal problem. You could argue that fundamentally it's not a legal problem. It's really a relationship breakdown, and you can't legislate a relationship into working, right? You can just perhaps put some constraint around it to allow it to function. So you have to understand for yourself, what does it mean to win? When I started out, I had no contact with the kids at all. So any sort of contact was going to be great. However, I was disappointed with how little I got in the beginning, and I had to fight all the way to the appeal to get a shared living order, which is what I've got now. And I've had to go through quite a bit of litigation because it's very interesting how people are uncomfortable with the father having a shared live with order, and how people, for some reason, they keep asking me about the appeal when it's no longer relevant in court, but it really baffles their minds how I was able to win representing myself with absolutely no help from solicitors. I think I got some consultations as well to help, but when it came to the actual appeal, nobody wanted to help me. So I had to figure it out on my own, and I'm glad I did because it really taught me a lot about the system. But the reason why I say this is I was not lucky. I put in hours and time and energy and effort and money to learn this stuff, to become better at this stuff, to practice this stuff, to get the results I've gotten. And people who have worked with me have had, and I've heard myself in court, the judge saying, we don't usually do this, but, and then they make an order that is not usual. And the reason why it's not usual is because the way the case is presented is not the usual way people present the case. And so at some point they have no choice, but they have to, concede when you are in the right. And so everybody can do this. Everybody can make that effort to win, but there's no guarantees. That's the other reality of it. There are other things I might want in future, which I believe I will get them. But it takes a lot. It takes a lot. So let's just jump into some of the most important aspects of how you can win in family courts. So the first thing you need is what I said earlier, is to understand that it's not just a legal problem that you have, right? You haven't broken any law. Strictly speaking, your ex has not broken any law in essence, as far as you being able to see your children is concerned and you be in their lives. Of course, if you have some criminal convictions or whatever, then that's a problem. But in going to court or in a relationship breakdown, that in and of itself is not breaking the law. So the legal framework really is what guides the process and shifts certain things in different directions, right? So we'll touch on that. But one thing you really have to understand is there are very few pressure points you have available to you. When I say a pressure point is situations where you force the judge's hand or you force your ex's hand. There are very few. So 90% of your preparation in this regard will be to be able to capitalize on that opportunity when it comes your way, right? So you want to be ready ahead of time so that when there is a point where you can apply pressure and say, look, it has to be this way. Obviously you phrase it the right way, but you can make that statement or that assertion, you have to be ready. And a lot of fathers are not ready, right? So because of that, many fathers lose cases or lose results that they would have otherwise won if they were prepared. Now, you might think solicitors would be looking out for that, but the truth is they don't look out for that. And we'll talk about why in a moment. So let's look at the three major aspects of winning your case, right? Because like I said, it's not just a legal problem. So the first and most important thing is very counterintuitive, and that is your emotional state. How you feel about the situation, how you feel about yourself, how you feel about your children, and how you feel about your ex will influence your case and how you go about it above all. And I know you may think, that's strange, that's weird. What my emotions got to do with going to court? Now, you will find that the interview with CAFCASS or social services, depending on where you are, but usually in the UK it's CAFCASS. And CAFCASS is the court advisory service who are supposed to represent the interest of the children, right? So they will interview you to see where you stand. They'll also interview the mother of the children, and depending on the age, they will interview the kids or perhaps want to see the kids. Every case is different about exactly how they go about it, but what is common is there will be at least um, an hour or two of interviews. I've realized that they don't always see the father with the kids. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. I've had fathers who got that. I've got fathers who didn't have that, and so on and so forth. So again, those are specifics of your case, right? But overall, CAFCASS is going to determine even whether your court case is going to proceed with the new laws that we have, with the new systems that we have, which is supposed to be called the child focus courts and the Pathfinder system and whatever they've put now, which is quite new. There's a lot more gatekeeping, a lot more gatekeeping. So they may look at your case and recommend right from the beginning that they don't think it's advisable for you to see your kids. They were already doing that before, but now when they do that, it carries more weight because they put more time and effort before the actual court hearing. So how you react to them will be derived from your emotional state. So let's say you are still bitter and angry about your ex, right? And I'm not saying you are, but it is normal if you are. It is normal, right? So you would think, as human beings, they would say, oh, I understand, he's angry, she's not letting him see his kids. No. If you get on the phone with them or in person and you start acting agitated or angry, that will work against you right away. Now, it works against mothers too when they do it, but it only works strongly against them when you can contrast their behavior with calm, collected, and child-focused statements and demeanor. So really, the truth is, like, I'll just be honest, what I did. I just cried my eyes out in secret where nobody could see me. I punched the wall, I ran, I exercised, like I really got the anger out of my body. I got the grief. I really went for it. Like so much so that I scheduled time, like at 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock, I'm going to grieve the breakup. I'm going to grieve the fact that I can't see my children. That's what I did, literally. Because I knew that even one inflection, one wrong statement, one wrong answer to a question would end my case. And I'm not saying it's fair, I'm not saying it's right, but it's what you have to do, right? And I can see a lot of people already thinking, oh, no, that's too much, that's wrong, that's bullshit. My lawyer is going to fight for me, blah, 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 blah. Your lawyer cannot convince CAFCASS. Your lawyer can only take it from the point where CAFCASS leaves it off. So CAFCASS listens to you, the child and the mother, or the children and the mother, and perhaps other people involved in your children. They will contact the school, they will contact the nursery, they will speak to everybody they can speak, right? Like a 360 kind of assessment. So when they do that, how you present yourself to others also matters. So essentially, your whole life becomes the courtroom. And how you run your life, how you present yourself depends on your emotion, right? Because if you're angry, and I was angry at the beginning, and you take it out on people, or people feel that bitterness from you, that's what they're going to tell CAFCASS. That's how you relate to them. So right away, you'll be seen as the bad guy. You're already seen as kind of a bad guy by being a father or by being a man in this society. So you play right into that stereotype. When you go to court, if you are having a fact-finding hearing, right? If there are some false allegations against you, some domestic abuse allegations and so forth, your emotional state will determine how people will judge you. Again, is it fair? I wouldn't say it is, but that's the reality. So how you act emotionally, unfortunately, will affect a lot of decisions about you. A lot. And one thing you have to understand is that in the beginning, you are really playing defense for the most part. Because in most court cases, the mother accuses the father of domestic abuse, right? Falsely or rightly, that's what happens. The standard belief in our society, and the comfortable belief, and what is the easiest thing for everybody, is to assume that you are the abuser. And even if they don't think you're the abuser, they have to play it safe, right? Because if it turns out you are, and they make the wrong decision, then it looks bad on them. So the system is set up such that people will play it safe and will assume that you are abusive. So if you ask a stupid question in court and you get angry because it's a stupid question, it is not like real life where it's a stupid question and you'll be like, that's a stupid question, so you react accordingly. No, in court, you have to treat it like it is the word of God being dictated to you, and you are responding to it. Again, it's not fair. It's not fair. But you're playing defense. You are essentially showing, look, I'm not that guy. And you can't show that guy if you are emotional. You have to transcend the confidence you had before, any insecurities you had before you met your children's mother, any fears, any guilt, any negative emotions that you've had. You have to transcend them. I'm not saying you can't feel negative things, but they will be used against you. And the opposition, right, the lawyer, will make you look horrible. And you have to sit there and take it. If you scoff, like let's say she says, and my client was abused every morning verbally before going to work by the children's father, right? She'll say something like that. And you're like, wow, I never did, like, wow. Just that kind of reaction is already against you. You really have to be there and be like, poker face, relaxed, as you are being slandered, by a lawyer who wasn't there, acting as if she witnessed the whole thing and almost photographed it. That's how calm you have to be. As they say, I think, calm like a cucumber. That's how calm you have to be. So your emotional state is one part of it. The next part is your legal defense and your legal offense, right? So that's where your solicitors come in. That's where your lawyers come in. That's where your legal education comes in. Now, the truth is, like I mentioned earlier, lawyers will not tell you a lot of things for many, many, many reasons. But one of the reasons is a lawyer is bound by a code of ethics. So let's say you go to court, right? Or you've not yet filed your C-100, you've not yet filed to see your kids, as an example. So you go and see a solicitor. The solicitor cannot tell you, oh, by the way, she's going to accuse you of domestic abuse. The solicitor cannot do that. I can do that because I'm not bound by that code of ethics, right? What I say to you is not legal advice. I'm just sharing my experience and my insight. But the lawyer cannot tell you, hey, you're going to face domestic abuse allegations, and there'll be a lot of lies and falsehoods being said about you. Because obviously you can then take them to court to say, look, this is what they told me. How did they know that when the case hasn't even happened? You see what I'm saying? Like, they can't tell you certain things because it goes against the code. They can't tell you, listen, don't get emotional because you'll be judged. Because that will be saying there's a bias against you in court. So now you will say, look, the solicitor told me there is a bias. The solicitor is not really at liberty to tell you that. The solicitor, the lawyer, is an officer of the court still. Their job is to assist the court to make a decision by representing you or your ex, or in some cases the children. Their job is not necessarily to win the case for you. There's a difference. And because we watch movies, and we often think that what we see in movies is what happens in court, that's not what happens. One moment. Let me sip for my world's best dad cup, which I got years ago on Father's Day, and I still have it. I'm so grateful for it. So apparently I'm the world's best dad. I'm sure you think you are the world's best dad. Then where is your cup? I'm just messing about. I'm just messing about, but let's get serious. So the solicitor cannot tell you certain things, right? If when you speak to a solicitor, you can't say, "Oh, I think she's a dumb bitch and I hate her." Right? He or she is not really in position to be listening to such a conversation. They have a very strict guideline within which they can operate. And when they're assisting the court in making a decision, yes, they fight for your interest, they represent your best interests, and arguably, ostensibly, the best interest of the child. But they don't have a lot of power beyond essentially trying to persuade the court to interpret the situation in a certain way. And it's usually easier to represent the mother than the father, right? So a lot of solicitors, in my view, just take the easy road. It's like they'll just tell you some bullshit because nobody's going to hold them accountable. They don't have to make an extra effort to help you win. They don't have to do that. They just can go through the motion, which is why I got rid of my solicitor, because I realized she was just going through the motion. And we actually had a few email exchanges where I was like, I don't think you're doing enough. And it's very interesting because I once had somebody cover for her who was higher up, and I later got all my files and I read their exchange. So I think she said to the superior that I'm never satisfied, but the person who was higher up actually put more effort. So I knew, oh, there are some solicitors who put more effort, very expensive, by the way. So there's a difference. But even then, they can't think outside of what they are used to because it's just their job. You have to understand that these are your children. But to them, in the morning, they show up at 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock or whatever time they show up at their office, clock out at 5 or 6 or whatever, and that's their work day. And we all know on some days we don't perform as well as on others. As a father, you have to perform at your peak performance every day, which is why your emotional state is also important, which we mentioned earlier. But with the legal side of things, whether you have a solicitor or not, you have to become very familiar with the law. Because your solicitor will not spend time looking through case law. I have seen barristers, right? And I've seen this with clients as well, say something. And even recently, in one of my litigations where I was in court, and thank God it went my way, but the solicitor said something to me, and they were like, making a comment like about what I said, a negative comment. But when we got inside, I'm talking of the opposition's solicitor. But when we got inside the court, he used my very same argument because he realized the magistrates at that time were looking at him like, what? And then he used my words for them to be like, oh, okay. So I was like, in my head, I didn't show it, but I was like, this is why I said what I said. Because at that time, we were able to negotiate a deal between us, but I knew the judges would be skeptical about it, right? So that's why I said certain things to him, and he ignored it. But then he used my same argument in court. So this shows you that you have to be prepared, not even for yourself, even for your opposition solicitor. You want to get to a point where you have so much influence, where sometimes inadvertently, sometimes unintentionally, they follow your lead. All the time you give credit to everybody else because your job is to win, not to get credit, right? But that's how prepared you have to be. You have to be so prepared that if you were supposed to represent your ex against yourself, she could win with your arguments. Like, that's how prepared you have to be. Why? Because there is a bias against fathers. It's unfair and it's wrong, but that's what it is. You have to go above and beyond for your children. You are their only hope for them to have that stable relationship with you and have a stable life. So you can't afford to do less than your best. And even your best sometimes is not good enough. So you have to do better, right? So get familiar with the law. Strictly speaking, you are supposed to be instructing your solicitor. When they are skeptical, when they scoff at things, doesn't matter. Still present what you need to them. Some of them you may be wrong. Some of them, in the heat of the court proceedings, will be discarded because they won't work. But often, one tiny thing that you said is what's going to save your case. And I've had that with myself, with my clients, sometimes in court, sometimes with CAFCASS. And by the way, if I didn't state it earlier, when you're talking to CAFCASS, you are in court. Even if you're sitting on the toilet during your phone call, you are in a courtroom because that will be used in court. But often one sentence that you say will turn everything around, right? So in my case, one example was the social workers involved wanted to cut all contacts with the kids and me. So one of the problems was the acrimony between the parents. So when CAFCASS called me, before making a report, they were asking, like, look, what one of the questions was, what do you think is the cause? So if I was the angry self, I would say, oh yeah, because she's doing this, because she's doing that, which she was. But I knew at that point that if I said anything like that, it would be over. So I said, look, it's something that baffles me as well. I'm trying my best to change and to be better for the kids. So I hope it works out, but I really wish I could also get to the bottom of this. Something to that effect. Straight away, that changed everything. So even though the social workers were saying, cut all contact, Kafka said, no, don't cut the contact. Keep it going. Keep it happening, right? So, and I say this because a lot of times people are angry with Kafkas, and I can understand why. But the truth is, you have to know how to talk to them. You really have to know how to talk to them. And I have some videos about that as well. I've done some lives as well. And of course, get in touch with me directly if you're going to talk to Kafkas and you need some help in your preparation. You want to practice the phone calls, you want to rehearse, which always helps. But that's very, very important. So that brings us to the next third element, which is your persuasion skills. You have to start becoming more persuasive. What do I mean? You have to start being able to influence what people say about you within this context and what decisions people make about you and sometimes their actions. Now, this does not mean you become some kind of, mind reader or you use some kind of magic to make people do what you want to do, because obviously that's not possible. But you want to persuade the court to see things your way, right? Ultimately, that's what you are going to court for the bench, for the judges, for the magistrates to say, look, I want this for your child, and I can see that you're gonna give them that. So there you go. Here's the decision that, they'll just say in the best interest of the child, but essentially works in your favor. So that takes a lot of work. And again, a lawyer cannot help you with that, because one of the key elements of persuasion when it comes to court is the facts of the case. So that's why preparation ahead of time is so important. I'll give you a few examples so that I can start applying them immediately. So for example, let's say your children's mother says no overnight stays, right? But you want overnight stays, obviously, because those are your kids, your children, and you want them to spend time with you, right? And you want them to sleep in their other home, which is your home. Which is your home. By the way, if you have any questions, just comment or ask them. If you disagree as well, feel free, and I will do my best to answer your Questions. So, where was I? You want overnight stays. You must have every single thing the child needs, even if you think the overnight stay is realistically 6 months away or 9 months away or even a year or more away. You have to have them ready today. And I'll be honest, that's one thing where I messed up, because I got some things ready, but I didn't get everything ready. And I was blindsided when the CAFCASS officer says, oh, so where's the child going to sleep? Because I thought I'll just keep the money, and when I get the order, I'll buy the extra stuff. Luckily for me, I had bought a few things, but I didn't buy a lot of things that I should have had. And I'm ashamed to say I didn't buy the bed yet, because I thought, look, it's a new house. I thought if the child grows older, they want a different bed, whatever it was. But that was a mistake, because then the CAFCASS officer wrote in the report, there's not even a bed for the child. And I was so angry with myself. So that's when I knew that that was one of the biggest mistakes I made. So whenever I advise fathers, whenever I work with fathers, I say, look, make sure you have everything. And one of the secret tactics is make the child's room look as attractive as possible, right? So if you have, depending on the age of the children, obviously, because if they're older, they'll sleep, in a more adult-like room, but still make it more attractive. So I had to do the task of making it. One of the kids was very young, to make it, appealing to children. So luckily for me, as the case went on, there was a new CAFCASS officer. So the new CAFCASS officer also wanted to see the house, but we had a video call. She couldn't make it. So at the time the room was ready, so she saw the toys, she saw the colors, she saw the things. She was like, oh, you've got all this, So all those things really changed the whole thing, because it gives them the feeling of, oh, wow, this father loves the kids. And I'll tell you a secret. For some reason, social service, well, I know why, but let's not go into that today. So let's just say, for some reason, social workers, CAFCASS officers, they like a nice children's room. It just tickles their hearts, right? So again, that's something a lawyer cannot necessarily tell you, or may not necessarily tell you. But that's part of your persuasion. You're not just persuading with your words, you're persuading with actions and what you show them. Because now, when they look at the nice room and all that stuff, assuming there is no safeguarding concerns, it's very difficult for them to say the child cannot go there, when they can see the child is missing out on all these things, right? And again, even if you don't think for the next 6 months, 3 months, 9 months, whatever time the child will not have it because of the proceedings, still have it. Now you may be in a situation where the CAFCASS officer is not going to look at your home. Send photographs. Like, oh, by the way, here's where the children will be sleeping. You do that. Now, you may say, oh, it's unsolicited, blah, blah, blah. They may even make a little complaint. I've never heard that, but in case they do, but at least they can see it. Like, your persuasion has to be such that you don't just follow what everybody is doing. You're so focused on what you know must be done that you make sure they see it. Send a video, send photographs, right? Oh, don't make it an essay. Oh, here's where the kids will be sleeping. That's the bed, and so on and so forth. The toys. If they're older, here's a computer ready for them, child safe, blah blah blah. Do everything you can, because now you are persuading with pictures, with reality. That's one example. Another example of persuasion is, and we talk about words as well in a moment, but another example of persuasion is do things like the triple P parenting course and get the certificate. You just say you did it, here's my certificate. Oh, you're not ordered to do it, but just do it, because it shows commitment. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean straight away that the needle will move that much in your favor, but it's your job really is to move it little by little, by little by little by little, in your favor. Remember, in the beginning, it's mostly defense. Defend, 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 a little attack if necessary. Defend, 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 a tiny attack if necessary. You're more planting seeds ahead of time, rather than matching the energy, because she's gonna come at you like, oh, he's a monster, he did this, financial abuse, domestic abuse, blah, abuse, right? Abuse, like you should change your middle name to abuse, right? That's how bad it gets. We all know how it gets, whether it's true or not. And of course, whatever she did is your fault. You cannot match that energy. Yes, you do have to create a balanced picture, but there's a way you present your argument. So here's where the persuasion element comes again. So you know how to present things in a factual way. So rather than say, she's so horrible to the kids, always shouting on them, she never really played with them, and so on and so forth. No, 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 no. That's going to work against you. Instead, you could say something like, um, on a Thursday before we broke up, she screamed at the kids, which I asked her not to do that because it was a bit unfair to them that our issues were affecting them. She started screaming some more. Then she threw a toy and stormed out of the house. And I spent the rest of the evening playing with the kids, trying to calm them down. And we ended up having a nice time watching Smurfs or something, or whatever it is the kids want to watch. Right? So you want to create the picture. You're persuading by showing the contrast between her behavior and your behavior. Right? So that dissipates that negative energy. And a lot of times it takes the judiciary off guard because they are all ready for what most fathers do, which is matching the energy. People, they call it mudslinging, throwing mud at each other, trying to make the other person look bad. So you gain an advantage by dissipating that energy, because over time, people will start getting more comfortable with you. And look, I've had the opposing lawyers almost make arguments for me. Like, it's crazy, like how it shifts over time. I've had the same social workers that were against me, that were saying cut all contact, later on were fighting for me to have more contact. They were fighting for me to have overnight stays. Like, it really flipped because my attitude also changed. And over time, because I was applying the persuasion skills that I'm teaching you, they started changing their mind. So when you get to court, you want the circumstances of your case, the facts of the case, to be in your favor as much as possible. Because the facts of the case is what the law is applied to, right? So if you have false allegations and you're able to prove them wrong, that's one thing. In some cases, the false allegations or the allegations, even if they are found to be true, do not affect contact. So that's another thing. It depends on your case, and so on and so forth. Again, seek qualified legal advice on this. But the point is, you want to always be in position to neutralize the negative energy coming towards you. And courts tend to appreciate that. When you represent yourself, and I prefer always to represent myself, you will also experience a bit of the court taking the solicitor a bit more than you. When you have magistrates, they will take the legal advisor to the magistrates a bit more seriously even than themselves, because they are not certain of what they are doing. A lot of people don't spend enough time dealing with family courts outside of what they are used to really figure things out. So that's why they follow the path of least resistance. So for example, you may have read 20, 30, 40, 50 case law documents, but the magistrate might have read only like a few, right? You may actually become knowledgeable about a specific area of the law than the magistrates or even a judge sometimes judging you, because the judges, people think judges are always like the best the best lawyers and so forth. No, a judge is a job just like any other. Yes, it has a certain esteem, but you apply for it. So somebody who's been a law teacher could literally apply to be a judge and become a judge. Somebody that was a legal advisor for many years might be able to become a judge. Somebody who was even a paralegal, I've been told, could apply to be a judge. So, and the magistrates are just lay people, right? In the UK, at least. They are just lay people like you and me who applied for it, and they are there. So almost anybody could be judging a family law case. So don't assume that they know the law as they should. because, and that's how I won my appeal, because I knew that law, because it meant so much to me to get, the shared live with order, that I studied it. I spent a lot of time reading the case law, understanding what it takes and so forth. So I knew they were wrong, among some other things that they did that they shouldn't have. But I knew they were wrong in the law. So, all these elements come together, but the more effort you put in, the more you'll be able to persuade. You have to know how to talk so that the person doesn't feel stupid. If the legal advisor makes a mistake, or the judge makes a mistake in court, or the legal advisor, the magistrate, says something wrong, you have to know how to present it so they don't feel stupid. It's something that I didn't understand, because I had some cases that didn't go exactly how I wanted. And later, looking back, I realized I triggered the judge. And you might think, oh, the judge will be objective, but no. And I knew I was right, because in the end, I ended up getting exactly what I wanted, just that it delayed more than it should. So I knew I was right, but the judge, just decided to go off and created a situation where it was difficult for me because I triggered him the way I said what I said, which if I knew what I know now, I would have mitigated that. But I didn't. So obviously we all learn, we make mistakes, and I'm sharing with you the experience. At this stage, I've spent so much time in court that a lot of times the staff members know me by name, you know, and I'm cool with some of the staff members. That's how much I decided to go into it, because I wanted to win my case. And when I started helping fathers, I wanted to be able to really provide the best advice I can. So that's why I encourage you to get in touch for a free consultation. Now, so we've gone through the three elements of your case, which most people concentrate on the legal part, but we also have the emotional state, we have the legal part, and of course we have the persuasion. So just to recap, before I add more onto it, the emotional state is how you feel about yourself, how you feel about your ex, your children, how you feel about the court, and how you present yourself as the result of that state. It is the most important thing, because that is the foundation of how you react to things. If you are depressed, which a lot of us did get depressed, right, or angry during the process, you have to deal with that first, because you start making the wrong decisions. If you are so depressed that you can't even pick up a document to read for your case, or you are so down that you think you're just gonna lose, you're not doing anybody any favors, right? So you must get yourself in the right state. You don't want to be in court looking angry, because then all the allegations will look true. If you are cross-examined and you act out, it doesn't matter what you're saying. How you're saying it will have an effect on you. And if you're in the wrong emotional state, you may get very good advice, but that advice, you just won't be able to apply it because of your state. And by the way, if you have any questions, put them in the comments and I will answer them as we're here. So the second level is the legal stage, right? So that is where you get your solicitor, and if you're representing yourself, you want to understand the law as much as you can. You have to spend time to at least have a very clear idea of how it works. In the UK, I think it's worth mentioning now, a lot of people don't know that parents don't have the right to see their children, neither the mother nor the father. People wrongly use the term custody in court, or when they talk about cases. In UK, you don't get custody of your children. In UK, it's the children that have the right to contact with their parents when safe to do so. And the new laws are trying to even take that away, where neither parent is presumed to be necessary in the child's life. That's where we are at. And I wouldn't be surprised if that, I'm not certain if that has passed yet. As far as I know, it's not yet been passed into law. But a lot of people are fighting for this because they think that will make it easier to get rid of fathers. And of course, the government likes it because it makes it easier to control the population, because then the government becomes the one who controls your child. The school controls your child. You know, the state controls your child. It is not a conspiracy theory. You can look it up and you will find out you have no rights. So you have to know things like that, because I've seen fathers who go to court and say, I have the right to see my child. And the judge will say, no, you don't. And you're already, or you're already 3 steps behind. Now you're 9 steps behind, because now you're the asshole in the court's eyes who thinks he has the right to children. And it's so weird, because the fact that you think you have the right to your children will be interpreted as you being selfish and only think about yourself. And of course, you're not thinking only about yourself, but that's how the courts will interpret it. That's how the courts will interpret it. And I've seen that happen, and it's very unfortunate, and it's very depressing, and it's painful for a stranger to tell you you don't have the right to see your child. But that's the law. So you have to know this. You have to know what the laws are regarding domestic abuse. So things like Practice Directions 12J, very important. You have to know them. And wherever you are in the world, you have to know what applies in your specific area, your specific state. You must know this, because you don't want to get to court to find these things out. And again, the third part is persuasion, right? So when you know the legal side, you can prepare your persuasion ahead of time. When you know what may be when you know what you may be accused of, you can start preparing your defense straight away. Look for the evidence, and look, you don't know whom you might have to persuade. You have to get friendly with the school. If you've got money, make some donations, like volunteer if there is something. Be nice to the receptionist, be nice to the teacher, go for parents' evenings. Do everything you can for people to see you as a great father, because CAFCASS will talk to the school, most likely. You really want to not just persuade everybody in your life to be on your side, not just very close to you, to in the school and everywhere else. You never know who will make that influential decision. You have to know how to persuade CAFCASS as well. So there's a lot of work there, but it's doable when you have a step-by-step system, which is what I provide through my service. I give you coaching, I give you step-by-step assignments, what to do to be ready. And when you're preparing yourself, let's say, even if you've not even filed yet, you should already start preparing for the final hearing. Even though it's months away, you should already be preparing. And with the new UK laws, the court moves much faster than before. They have stricter timelines. So you have less time to prepare. You have less time to prepare. So the more you know what will shortcut your work or what will make it easier, the more likely you will succeed. Right? So you have your emotional state, your legal state, your persuasion, which includes building the right circumstances. Now, once you get to a certain point, the whole process will be demystified to you. You realize that there's a mechanism of how it all works. You realize that you can systematically prepare and you can systematically get good results. However, what will always work against you is the bias in the system. So I want to speak a little about that. So for example, you go to court, you are representing yourself, or you are cross-examining, you're speaking, and you see poker faces, right? The judge or the magistrates are not showing any emotions. You can't read them. Now, you are aware that they are biased against you often. And even when they are not biased against you, they know the system is on the mother's side. What often they are afraid of is that the mother will appeal the case, or that you may appeal, but they are more scared of the mother's appeal than your appeal. So you may be thrown off guard because you will assume that they are already deciding against you, right? Which may well be the case. But one way to overcome that is you have to literally prepare the case against yourself so that you know what will be the reasons for them to reject what you're asking. You want to know whatever they may want to do. So that's why reading case law helps. And obviously consulting with somebody such as myself helps. Nonetheless, you want to be prepared with that. And then preemptively, you want to be able to say things already that will make it difficult for them to make those decisions. So using an earlier example of the overnight stays, the mother may make an argument, which I've seen happen, that you don't have the right place for them to live in, to sleep, right? And let's say before you were a slobby person, right? We've all been slobs. Like, I'll raise my hand, I've been quite a slob. And she raises that. You know that is coming. So again, you've already sent the pictures or you've shown your house is clean and so forth. But even in your speech, you say those things. So it's not that you are trying to read their minds, but you are just providing a logical framework that will negate whatever in your specific case is used against you. Now, in most cases, I don't know why my nose is itching. My mom used to say that when your nose is itching, it means you get a visitor. One moment. This tea is good. Peach tea. Peaches. Peaches for the bitches. So, you want to be able to be very preemptive, and you don't want to be thrown off guard knowing that there is that bias against you, right? And you should always be prepared that sometimes the things they will say don't sound reasonable or rational or don't make sense to the regular person. So for example, one thing, and people don't believe it until it happens to them, is they will say the children haven't seen you in 6 months, right? Which is why you shouldn't delay this. But let's say they haven't seen you in 6 months. So the argument will be they are not used to you. So it's not safe for you to just be introduced to the children. It's ridiculous, right? Because in real life, if you travel for 6 months, and you return, you don't go and stay in a hotel for a few weeks and you see your children once every week or once every 2 weeks till they get used to you again, right? It's ridiculous. You just go and see your kids, you live in your house, whether the mother travels or the father travels. By that logic, no military person or any diplomat or whoever travels, pilot, whatever, or ship captain should see their children because they are away for a long time. So it's irrational. It's bullshit, to be plain. But often you hear such a decision, and I think it's part of the bias because they just want to separate the children from the fathers. That's my belief. But you cannot react to those things. And if you know those things are coming, that's where you already must have a plan to increase that amount they might give you. So a lot of fathers go to court without a suggested plan. They don't have a plan of, okay, let's say we agree with you. What do you propose? So if you know that this is an argument, sometimes, I'm not saying always, but sometimes it's good to say, look, the children haven't seen me in 6 months. So I suggest 8 hours supervised contact every week with them. And again, that is an example of a strategy. If you know they are going to restrict your contact for whatever reason, let's say accusations, allegations, whatever, right? So I'm not saying that's for every case. And I'll explain why you should do it that way. So you say 8 hours supervised contact every weekend for 3 weeks or 6 weeks, and then unsupervised, and then overnight stays in let's say 5 months or whatever, if everything goes well. Now you may think, oh, that's not enough. But what should I understand? So here's the explanation why you should do it that way. If you don't do it preemptively and you can see it coming, if you understand how they operate, they may give you an hour every 2 weeks in a contact center. You understand what I'm saying? I've seen situations where fathers were seeing their kids once a month. I had it for a while, actually, in the beginning, an hour a month. But I didn't know what I know now. If I knew, I would have preemptively made a different suggestion, because then it's more difficult for them to cut it down. So they'll say, oh no, 8 hours is too much. But it's stupid to say, it's not a guarantee, of course, but it's stupid to say, oh, let's just give you 1 hour a month, because now you've given a reasonable plan considering the thing which they're worried about, which is the kids have not seen you. It's not reasonable in the real world, but in the court system, they have a different way of thinking, because what they are thinking is, if we just allow it at a time, the mother will be upset, which they don't like to upset the mother. Again, I know it's not right, but that's the reality. What if he's really as crazy as she says he is, and he does something wrong, and it's going to be a blowback on us? Again, it's not fair, but we all know, if a father does something wrong, we see how the newspapers react. When a mother does something wrong, we see how they always try to make excuses for her, right? So all these things are what you have to be aware of, that bias and that irrational thinking. It's like a different story world altogether. So the reason why a lot of fathers lose is because they go into court thinking, oh, I'll just say the truth, I'll show how it is, the court will see that surely I'm a great father, and they will give me 50-50, right? And that's not what happens. And then they get shell-shocked after all the pain of missing their kids. Now you get to be told that you're an abuser and you're going to be on trial. It's a shock. So you have to be prepared for that. You have to know these things ahead of time. And sometimes, just because you are prepared, the opposition backs down. Because, okay, there are accusations, but you have your evidence, you have your arguments, they are really well written. Which brings me to the last point I want to talk about today, is your written communication to court. So I'm talking of your position statements and your witness statements, and your skeleton arguments if you're appealing or in certain kinds of trials, right? So you have to master the art of written persuasion, or get somebody who's good at it, me, to help you write it, because that's another process altogether, which we don't have time to go into. But the rules are the same. Now, here's what you should understand. Anytime you're speaking to anybody in court, what you're saying is going to be represented on paper. And finally, is going to be represented in an order. So even your CAFCASS interview, yeah, it's speaking, but remember, she's going to write what you are saying or summarize it. You understand? So everything will end up on paper. If it's not on paper, it does not exist, which means two things. Be careful what gets written down, because if it gets written down, it becomes gospel, especially in the beginning. What is written down in that first CAFCASS report is what the rest of the case will be based on. And it's extremely difficult to make the judge go against the CAFCASS recommendation, because by law, the judge has to explain if they went against the CAFCASS recommendation. Magistrates tend to agree with CAFCASS recommendation like 99% of the time, because again, they are lay people. Judges, 90% of the time, will agree with the CAFCASS recommendations. Number one, because it's easier. Number two, because it's difficult to present compelling information or compelling evidence that will make them go against that. So always think that what you are saying will be written down. How will it be written down? What you say will be written down. So you don't say, I'm not saying you will do that, but people do that. They'll say stuff like, I can't be bothered. Or they'll tell the CAFCASS officer, you're biased. Or they'll start arguing with the CAFCASS officer. You're done. Because what will be written is very argumentative, not forthcoming, difficult to communicate with. I don't recommend contact at this stage, because there's clearly emotional dysregulation, which suggests some of the abuse may have actually occurred in this manner. I'm just making this up as I go, but you get the idea. Everything you say will be condensed. So that's why you also need to be making your notes. You need to read court documents, and don't assume that everybody knows the latest law and that the law will necessarily apply to you even if you are right? So it's a difficult thing. It's a difficult thing to do. As a father, to win in family court is almost an impossible task. When I was going for my appeal, nobody wanted to support me. I went even to some of the fathers' organizations, a lot of people who claim to help fathers. They didn't want to help me because they said to me, less than 2% of appeals in family courts actually succeed. So there is no point in going for it. And you can imagine I was heartbroken because the very people I trusted and I believed would help me wouldn't. I had people, I remember there was this person I was calling who consults with fathers, and she started throwing up on the phone. Like literally started throwing up the phone. I don't know if she was drunk or what. And that was it. Like I had money to pay people. Nobody wanted to help me with the appeal because they always felt the odds are so much against you as a father, it's not worth going for it. But I realized I cannot follow the conventional way. I have to find my own system, my own strategy to win, which is what I did. And I was successful. So all the techniques I'm sharing with you are things that I've experienced, that have helped other fathers, and where I have not had a direct case like that against myself. I have done research for it, and I'm studying every day. I'm learning new things every day, and I do recognize that every case is different. Your case is different from the next, but there are some things in common. But the good news is, if you prepare, if you are systematic, you will be ahead of the opposition. So get in touch with me. Send me a message. Get in touch through bravefathers.com. Call me, send me a WhatsApp message, or just fill the contact form so you can get help. Let me help you out to win your case. And your first consultation is absolutely free. It's a full consultation, so it's not like a pitch or whatever. It's a full-on intense, so get ready for it. Be prepared. Intense consultation, giving you the best strategy to go forward. Every case has a pivot point. So we have to find what yours is. And then we focus on that, and hopefully you get reunited with your children again, and you'll be the great father that you are, and you have a great life. So thank you so much. Feel free to write any questions below in the comment section. Of course, get in touch through bravefathers.com. I'll be back here again next week with more information for you. If you have any specific topics you want me to cover, let me know. And remember, when in doubt, you are the truth. See you next.
bravefathers.com